Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? Um, we're happy to be here this morning. You want to say hello, JoLynn?
Hello, JoLynn.
I think it's our shtick now, whatever we
Pretty
do.
much. Yeah. Yeah.
People like thinking, oh, this is so corny.
I'm sure.
That's
Icebreaker.
exactly. But thank you for joining us. The Industrial U.I. Webcast. I'm Anthony Paradiso. As always, we're always glad to be a part of this, have conversations. And there's always things going on. So all that good stuff. But always going to plug us in, plug Industrial U.I. Again, we do unemployment insurance cost control. We've been doing that for many years. And we also now do HR support. So anything surrounding compliance issues, anti-harassment, training and development, handbooks. We do it all. Any general HR support, employee relation matters, we can help you out. And we also now do verification of employment. So any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You could reach me. Again, I'm Anthony A. Paradiso at industrialui.com. And then JoLynn, how can everyone reach out to you?
J Haresign, JHaresign at industrialui.com.
Perfect. So we're gonna get started because we have a packed agenda today. Um, So as we always start, we kind of give you some tidbits, some information that's going on. And as always, there's always so much going on. So we're going to get right to it. Just also this year is the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. So I want to, get it was, a great thing that happened, and it's just good to kind of just know the anniversaries that come up. And actually, the EEOC chair, Charlotte Burrows, she did provide a statement on that. So again, it's the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. Also, as probably most aware, July 1st, so just this month alone, the Department of Labor did increase the salary level nationwide to qualify for certain overtime exemptions to the Fair Labor Standards Act, to the FLSA, from 684 per week to 844 per week. So and then that will increase next year in January. It will increase again to 1,128. So just keep that in mind. Texas is holding that off right now, so Texas is on hold on that, but all the other states need to comply with that. And again, any questions about this, feel free to reach out to us. As probably most all know as well, the Supreme Court did determine that courts no longer have to defer to an administrative agency's interpretation of the law when a statute is silent or ambiguous on a particular matter. This is reference to Chevron. So please just kind of read up on that. It's a lot of stuff to read up on, but again, it's just good to know, be mindful of it. And then also there was the FTC non-compete. There was a partial ban blocked by the Texas judge. Again, more information on that. That's still kind of up in the air. But as of right now, the net of that is that it will be taking place still on September 4th. So it's still breathes, it's still there. But again, anything can come up before then. Also, just some language as well. The EEOC did provide practices for preventing harassment in the construction industry. So again, take a look at that. There were a lot of really good tidbits there, a lot of good information. Again, it's a lot of reading. So just kind of put it aside for anything, any time you have in your schedule to take a read, because there's a lot of information in there. So that's informational. Just some other side things that are a little kind of fun, I guess. July is named after Roman dictator Julius Caesar, just kind of good to know. July, as far as the calendar, July 1st is Canada Day. We actually were just talking offline, JoLynn and I, about ketchup in Canada. So get some ketchup in Canada because there's certain ingredients that are in there that are not in the ketchup in Canada that are in the United States, and so it's in my opinion a much better ketchup in Canada. I'm going to get JoLynn some so she can try it out. That's a whole other thing. July 4th, again, as all know, again, that's Independence Day. July 7th marks Islamic New Year. July 14th is Bastille Day. So just some things too. And don't mind my head turning. I am paying attention. I'm just looking at my notes. I can't remember all this stuff, unfortunately. So that's it for information. Now we're going to get into a hot topic. As a lot of HR professionals know, SHRM did announce recently, just actually, no, actually, last week did announce, they did announce that they're dropping the, they're in the acronym, the DEI, they're dropping the E of equity out of their, out of their, out of the acronym DEI. So that's been a very, that's taken a whirlwind of comments on LinkedIn, other social media platforms. So we're going to kind of dive into that. Again, it's a conversation, open dialogue. JoLynn and I have our own thoughts. We're going to get into that. And again, it's just having an open dialogue. So just keeping an open mind to it. Our company that we work for, Industrial U.I, also we did post a blog that's up and running. So again, take a look at it. And again, we're just having an open dialogue.
Yeah, I know that the day that it was announced, my, LinkedIn emails were kind of blowing up with this decision. It seems like there's a lot of strong opposition to this, and a lot of people are using the words boycott and stay away from, and I understand how people are unhappy about a change, but as with any change, it is, in my opinion, better to make change if you disagree from the inside as opposed to from the outside. So I think it's more constructive to have a dialogue, which is why we chose to write an open letter to SHRM in the hopes that it would encourage an open dialogue. And, I think it's important that we have these conversations because equity is an important pillar of the DEI strategy. And although their position is that we're not getting rid of equity, we're just going to kind of bundle it all into inclusivity. And I feel like it draws away from the focus a little bit. And so that's kind of how my feeling is. I mean, how would you define equity in your own words, Anthony, and why do you think it's important in today's society?
So equity is an interesting word. I mean, again, it's kind of new in the DEI space. I mean, when I got into the DEI space, it was around 2017 or so. We really weren't using the word equity at all. I mean, we really was diversity and inclusion. And really then we were really so focused on diversity, we really weren't focusing so much on inclusion. And then, 2018, 2019 rolled around. We were starting to realize the real importance of inclusion. And actually, to kind of bring SHRM into the mix here, SHRM actually did. They were expressing the importance of inclusion, almost to the point where it's almost more important than diversity. I mean, it's hard to indicate what's more important, or inclusion and diversity. You kind of really need both. If they're 50-50, because without diversity, there is no inclusion. If they're and if we if we're not inclusive, we're not gonna have a diverse workforce. So we definitely need both. But they actually were the ones that really did start the conversation with how important inclusion and inclusion is, and they even with their acronym they were putting it I&D, and they changed their conference name, that it used to be Diversity Inclusion Conference, to inclusion, the inclusion conference, and that's even what you see now. I know I'm getting to an answer here, JoLynn, so sorry, I'm it's long-winded. But I'm just trying to get a little history too with equity and inclusion. And then COVID happened, the pandemic happened, and then that's really where equity really kind of got more involved, and then belonging also. So you probably see a lot of the acronym with the B involved, and that's kind of new as well. And equity is an interesting, and I do this in my presentations because equity to me is important, and we're going to get into all of that. But equity can be a confusing word because when I first heard equity in my mind, I was thinking right away a line of credit. I was thinking more of a financial transaction. I wasn't so much thinking, as the conversation that we're going to have today. And I think a lot of people kind of, when they hear that word, they kind of see that a little bit. But I always like to show we can't show it here because obviously this is this is webcast, but usually what I try to do is show an illustration, and I'm sure a lot of people listening here have seen a lot of illustrations out there showing especially that a baseball field where you see equity and equality, showing the difference between the two, because again we do kind of when people explain equity and equality, they kind of mix the two together. There could be confusion, and just kind of giving the illustration, pointing it out a little more, giving a little more, just kind of explaining a little more here. The illustration I'm referring to is a baseball game, and there's two sides. One side is showing the equity side of it, and then the other side is showing the equality side. And there's three people. There's a taller person, then we'll say that, a person that's mid-size, and then a smaller person, and then you have boxes. So with the equality piece, what you're doing is, what they're showing here is you have one box only for each person to stand on, and when they're looking over at the game, the taller person can still see the game regardless, because they didn't even need a box really. Whereas the shorter person needed not just one box, they needed two boxes to see the game. So if you're looking at equality, you're looking at it where it's, you're giving equal distribution to people, and that's good. But is that really fair? You're giving that fair advantage to people that already may be able to see, like in this example, like I'm showing at the baseball game. And then the equity piece is what you're doing is you're trying to now, you're going to give that shorter person the extra box, maybe two boxes, to see the game. I always find that illustration kind of helps, and there's other illustrations too that I show. But the baseball game seems to be really the most popular one. I know during COVID, that was really a very popular image that we see. But again, there's a lot more. And if you Google equity, equality, you're going to see in there, the differences. And that just kind of helps me see the difference. As far as an actual definition, there's three that I usually use in my presentations, and I'm just going to kind of read them, just snippets of it. But just, as far as equity, it occurs when institutions give equal opportunity to people of all races. And so again, it might sound simple, but it's not about offering everyone the same things. It's about addressing different advantages and barriers different people face. So recognizing we all don't all start from the same place. It's correcting and addressing imbalances and loopholes. So those are just some. That's just some of my own language with definitions that I've used in presentations of what equity is about. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, JoLynn.
No, I think that was a great illustration. That visual graphic, which is included on our post, kind of really sums it up. I mean, we have to acknowledge that there are barriers, seen or unseen, for people to fully participate in whatever they're choosing to do, whether it's in society as a whole or in the workplace. And more specifically in the HR community, when we acknowledge those barriers, we're acknowledging the people that those barriers affect. And we need to not only give, I saw this great analogy, I think it was on LinkedIn, so I apologize if I'm stealing it from somebody, but I felt it was really good, that it's like equality is inviting the people to the dinner. Like you're having a dinner party, you invite everybody. That's equality. I'm inviting everybody.
Yeah.
But only giving a seat at the table to certain people. Everybody's going to get a seat at the table. So that's equity. That's giving people a voice, giving people a seat at the table, in addressing the barriers that may prevent them from having that seat, and making it so that they can enjoy that seat at the table. I thought that was a really good analogy. And I think it's very important that equity stay at the forefront and not be just bundled in with inclusion, because I don't think you can have one without the other. And they're, like I said in our post, they're separate pillars. They're separate, with you remove one, and then your foundation in your workplace is less strong. So I think it's important that we keep it at the forefront. And that's why, in answer to our next question, what is your perspective on the recent SHRM decision to remove equity from DEI? That's where I feel that this decision to remove equity, although they're not really removing it, they're just kind of, putting it in a different package.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not a great move. I disagree. And, in the HR community and SHRM and other HR organizations, we're all kind of one, family at a family picnic. And sometimes, families disagree. And it's important to have those discussions and why you disagree. And I think that's more productive than, you know, just completely washing your hands and giving up and moving on to somewhere else. I think it's important to implement change from the inside.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my perspective. How about you, Anthony?
No, I completely agree with that. And I just as you mentioned analogies and using what equity and Verna Myers also has a great she's one of the leading experts in the DEI space, and she had a really awesome analogy, and I right now doesn't come top of my head right now, but there's been added layers to her analogy. So if you're hearing this, just go on Google Verna Myers. She has a lot of great things. And if you go on LinkedIn, a lot of people are posting really interesting analogies to what equity is. But it's going that extra, and I guess I'm going back to the definition again. It's almost like belonging. Equity is that extra. It's the next phase, the next step after you have an inclusive environment. And organizations are struggling with the inclusion right now because it's very easy to get data on diversity because you have applications, and you can do very easy quick surveys, and you can usually people fall into a certain category what you can kind of gather data for, whereas inclusion, I know the focus of today's conversation isn't on inclusion, but inclusion, managers have to speak to their employees. You're not gonna, there's not easy accessible data. You have to really talk and get information from your employees. And then once you have that inclusion, then you get to the next step of equity, really people feeling comfortable with who they are and being able to embrace themselves with their employees. Once you have that inclusion, then you get to the equity piece. And again, I think a lot of our organizations are struggling with the inclusion equity piece. Again, it is new. This is new stuff for us. We're not, this is new. I mean, inclusion was just added in 2019. Equity was added in 2020, 21. It's only a few years. So I'm not trying to, both of us aren't trying to knock, organizations that aren't maybe there yet. Because again, this is new, and SHRM is at that place too. It's new information. We don't know how to deal with these things. Again, it's all new, and how do we, is dropping the E from the acronym a big deal? I'm putting it under inclusion. To me, I agree with you. I don't agree with their decision. I believe that it should be stayed in, it should remain with the acronym because it is an important piece and it is separate than inclusion. Um, but again, it just having these open conversations. Like you've seen, JoLynn, too. I've seen a lot of boycotting. I've seen a lot of a lot of stuff on social media about SHRM, and again, not to get um into the weeds here and in depth, but there have been other concerns with SHRM from a few years ago. So there have been layers of occurrences that have happened. And I'll be very upfront, and I'll be very transparent here. I've had concerns. I've been in 2017 to 2019, I was a SHRM national blogger. I was going to the inclusion conferences. I was going to SHRM National. Um, I'm really a big believer in SHRM. It does provide a lot of knowledge and information. And then, along with that, being involved with National SHRM, I also, I was the DEI chair for the state of New Jersey for the Garden State Council, and I'm still a part of my local chapter SHRM, in a leadership role. So there is a lot of value with SHRM on the national level, and really especially on the state and local level, because there's so many networking opportunities. There's so much there. But how do you have this conversation surrounding National SHRM's decision to drop the E from the acronym? I don't know if it's safe for me to say, I'm gonna just boycott SHRM. I don't know if that's also the answer, because they still are a tremendous asset. There are a large community of HR folks in there, and I think a lot of people in the community are good people. It's just a matter of how do we have this open dialogue. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling.
No, I think it's important to have these conversations because that's how you bring about change. You know, uh you don't bring about change that's necessary if everybody is always in agreement. And I think it's good to disagree sometimes. You know, we're, like I said, we're family and it's okay to disagree. And we just want to make sure that, you know, we don't negate all the good that SHRM does, because there is a lot of good that it does.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
brings a voice to the HR community. It brings a voice to people who are, you know, HR departments of one that are looking for guidance. And I think it's a great platform for that. They provide a lot of resources. And I think that that is important to acknowledge. And sometimes people just, you know, have uh, a decision that impacts people, and maybe they didn't consider the impact, or maybe they did, but
yeah.
it's important to ask those questions. What are some of the things that companies and organizations can do to ensure that they focus on equity and equality? Like, I think equality is important, and equity, there is a difference between equity and equality, as we discussed. So what are some things that we can do to make sure that we still focus on equity?
It's really that education piece. I really think people don't know what I don't think a lot of people really know, and not even focusing on equity. I don't think people really know what DEI really is. I think it's become such a politicized acronym that if you hear, if you hear the word diversity, equity, inclusion, it becomes politicized. Even for me as a DEI practitioner, I even sometimes unconsciously am when I hear the word, I see it as buzzwords. It shouldn't be. Um, but it's just been ingrained, I mean, it's since probably the 2016 presidential election, and then 2020. I mean, it just becomes so politicized that when we hear the words, a lot of people just get turned off. And I don't know how you turn that around. Because I think if we had an open, it's almost like if we had a conversation about politics and we didn't get actually into names. So let's just say you have a presidential two people running and you just went over the issues without going into the names of the people running or the party you're affiliated with. I think a lot of us do agree on a lot of the same issues, but once you get into the weeds of names and the parties, then we become much more, we then, our conversations steer away. So I think the the important piece here really is that education piece, is that organizations really need to educate their employees on with what diversity is, what equity is, what inclusion is, and then belonging, which is a whole other part of the acronym, and then really take it from there. I mean, obviously, look at your policies, making sure that your policies you know are keeping DEI in the in your mindset, and the in the keeping that in mind when we are looking over our policies, when we are especially when we are looking at resumes and we're looking at the recruiting process. We want to make sure that we're not having biases. Again, these are conversations we've had for a few years now, but it's still very new, and maybe we have to give ourselves a little more time to really you know, develop this education to really learn what it is. 'Cause again, it is very new. I know when I was younger, I'm 43 now. We weren't discussing any of these things when I was younger. We weren't really discussing diversity, inclusion, equity. This is very new stuff. So I think maybe we have to keep that in mind, that it is still new and people, I think, are still in that learning phase. And so before we really can do much more, I think we really have to educate people. And I think that's just really, really where we have to start, is because I don't think people really know much about it. If that kind of really answers your question, I hope it does.
Yeah, no, I agree. Education is key because I think there's a lot of misconceptions on what equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equality are. There's so much, you know, color around those terms, good, bad, hot, cold, it is important for people to understand what it really means to me as someone in the workplace. You know, I want the same opportunities that everyone else gets. I want a chance to apply for that promotion. I want a chance to have impact on the decisions that are going to affect me. And if there are barriers, you know, that I can't control for me to be part of that process, then I'm not included. It's not diversity and it's not equity and it's
Yeah.
not equality.
Yeah.
So I think those are just acknowledging those things and getting people a better understanding of those terms. We can all, you know, really impact our workplace, and that's really our focus. You know, as HR people, we need to make sure we have a healthy and productive workplace, and in order to do that, there's lots of different elements. You got to provide training, and you got to provide, you know, equity and equality and inclusion and diversity. These are things that should not be politicized. These are things that should be just a fact.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that we need to acknowledge, you know, the barriers to achieving that equity. So what do you think are some of the common barriers to achieving that in the workplace?
But just kind of continue on with that. I think it's not people. I don't think people know what equity really is, like we've discussed today. I think people, it's become so political, unfortunately, that we can't get past the step we're in. We're at a stage right now in our country where we're just not able to, you know, we're almost there, but we just are not. There's just a barrier that we're dealing with things, you know, individually, with what, you know, even with our own ideology. And so I think the barriers there is really just not having enough information. And just kind of to piggyback with our last question, and also it intertwines with this question, is often senior leadership are making the decisions on what we should be doing at our organizations. And I don't think even senior leadership really knows what DEI is. And then if you do know what it is, how do you implement it within your organization? You know, if you have 2,000 employees, you know, how do you implement this huge initiative with all of our employees? I think that's the issue, but we don't know how to get there. And I think it's that communication piece, like with inclusion, you know, how do you know if your staff is really feeling included? The only way you're going to do that is by having communication between manager, supervisor, employee. And that goes even beyond surveys, because surveys are great and surveys are a good starting point, but they're also, it's not so black and white. You kind of have to kind of read in between the lines sometimes. In surveys, you can't really do that. Whereas you have open conversations, you can. So now how do you develop that trust? Because now you are having a conversation around this with your manager. Sometimes you may not want to answer truthfully if you feel included or not, because maybe your manager will feel slighted, or may feel that, you know, you may feel bad for them because maybe you're not, you know they're trying really hard to include you, but for some reason you're just not feeling included. So how do you have that conversation? I think that's where we're really at, is how do we have this conversation? And then you also bring time into it. How the managers have a time to add this to their list of responsibilities, because they already have a long list. I mean, we've seen the numbers out there that managers are, you know, are extremely stressed. There's not much work-life balance that they feel right now is happening. So now how do you add this extra layer of responsibility to them to now, you know, you want your employees to feel included, engaged, equity, you know, have an equity. How do you do that? I think that's really the issue. And I don't know the
Yeah.
answer.
Well, I think one of the things that managers need to understand is that diversity, equity, inclusion is in their own interests, right? So like managers wouldn't be stretched so thin if, you know, their employees weren't leaving because they didn't feel included, there wasn't enough diversity, or they didn't feel like they had an input. And, you know, find out why your people are staying, you know, have those conversations and understand that as a manager, it's in your interest from a hiring perspective, from an engagement perspective, from a productivity perspective. All of those things are going to benefit you as a manager moving forward. So DEI and DEIB are not dirty words to
Yes.
managers. They're not an extra responsibility. it is something that is going to benefit you as a manager going forward, because you're going to have the resources available to you to be able to make sure your team runs efficiently, and you won't be stressed, and you won't feel like you have so much on your plate. And once you think about it that way, it's like Willy Wonka says, scratch that, reverse it.
Yes,
Reverse your thinking
yes.
about, this is something I'm being forced to do. This is something I get to do. This is something, as a manager, I get to have these conversations with my employees, so I learn more about them, and it serves my interests because it will make me a better manager. It'll make my experience in the workplace much better.
100%, JoLynn. Even more than 100%, a million percent. I agree. I mean, that is the struggle is, is that we should be, when we hear the word DEI, it shouldn't be like this, oh my God, we have to do this, or that when you have it and you use it effectively, your retention is you're gonna have your employees staying longer. So you're not gonna have to deal with high turnover, training people that are, that are new again. You're gonna have people staying. I mean, listen, people are going to leave. That's just the way things happen. Think people are going to leave, people are going to leave for various reasons, but you want to try to keep all of your good employees. And if you are having effective DEI initiatives and you're doing it right, you're going to keep your people. So you're going to have less stress. 1,000%. That is the way it should be looked at. But unfortunately, people do look at it as an extra responsibility. And that's where the training and development really is. That's the training development piece that organizations need to just keep on doing, keep on plugging it away. I know it's an extra, it's an extra, it's an extra, it's extra money, it's extra financial piece that maybe some organizations are trying to, go through their, they may have some budget struggles, but the training piece of that is what's so important. And training your leadership, your management at the beginning is really important, because they have to learn how to maneuver these conversations that we're discussing right now with their employees. And then the other
Yes,
piece of that too is the recruiting piece, is making sure that your talent acquisition are trained. I mean, everyone should receive trainings on DEI, but the recruiting and talent acquisition are really important because they're bringing people in. So you want to make sure that they're not having, or at least they're aware of any biases they have. It's a lot of stuff, and it is tough. It's we're in a environment right now where it's tough. It's tough. It's hard. There's so much competition out there, but but even with all the competition we have, it's still a beautiful thing that we're having this conversation now. Because again, a decade ago we weren't having this conversation. So I'm optimistic with that piece, at least, that we are having the conversation like we are having. SHRM is kind of, even though we may disagree with them, at least they're they are leading they are leading us with the conversation. And I think, as you and I both said, we just have to have that open, honest dialogue like we are, and not taking things personal, and not having a fight over it, but just kind of having the conversation, let it marinate in our heads, and continue on with the just continue on with the conversation that we're gonna keep having.
agree. And this is where we engage in our shameless plug. So to all the HR practitioners out there, whether you're a party of one, a department of one, or if you have a whole team, if you are struggling and you need some help in getting your leadership to buy in, reach out to us. We're available. We can help you kind of get that message across to leadership about the importance of this, and ways that we can help you get to the point where you're in a stable environment where you can feel like these initiatives are going to work. So reach out to us and we can certainly help.
Yes, and I'll just give my email again, just in case you didn't get it in the beginning. Paradiso, Paradiso at industrialui.com. And JoLynn, how about you?
Haresign, JHARESIGN at industrialui.com. And you can also reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're both there.
Yeah, absolutely. We're there. Again, thank you all for listening. Any suggestions, comments, feel free to email us. We're here. any, if you want to be a guest, if you have any other, any topics that we can bring up, feel free to message us. But again, it's been a pleasure. As
Thank you,
always, thank you,
everyone.
JoLynn.
Bye bye.